found freedom on two wheels.
I think the most interesting thing about women in motorcycling is the misconception that women just started riding motorcycles 15 or 20 years ago. Quite frankly, they go way back into the teens. The Van Buren sisters made a transcontinental ride in 1916, I believe it was, on brand new Indian Power Plus machines. And their interest was to prove that they were good enough to be dispatch riders in the Army.
I started riding motorcycles in 1948. It was a 125S Harley. It was a little one-horse town in Illinois. 196 people and about 6 little pubs. And it was my ticket out of town. Of course, see, I have so many memories with this bike. I mean, I've got over 100,000 miles on this motorcycle. I get my groceries on my bike. I do every errand I possibly can because I enjoy it. To me, what would I do at my age if I wasn't into bikes? I've often wondered.
Well, I've been riding motorcycles recreationally for about 20 years, and I've been riding a police motorcycle for the last 3 years. I'm the only captain in probably the state of California, but certainly in Southern California who rides. I happen to be a woman, and I am totally in pig heaven. Or hog heaven if you count the fact that I'm on a Harley.
Motorcycles have always attracted independent adventure seekers. But it wasn't until after World War II that the motorcycle really became a universal symbol of freedom.
Probably the most revolutionary period in motorcycle culture overall was post-World War II. There were a lot of service people coming out of the war and who really didn't want to settle down quite yet.
The motorcycle offered personal freedom to vets returning to suburbanized America. It also provided a canvas for artistic expression.
People began to severely customize their Harley-Davidson motorcycles. And this is a process that went through the 50s, but really reached its pinnacle in the 60s and into the 70s. You began to see extended front ends. You began to see really tall sissy bars. And you saw all sorts of wild paint jobs and paint hanger handlebars.
I haven't been to a motorcycle event yet that hasn't been fascinating to me, even though I've been to thousands of them. To me, it's like a folk art show or an exhibit of individual tastes that are applied to vehicles.
Individuals shape their dreams into sculptures of iron and chrome. Manufacturers like Harley-Davidson took notice and introduced their own custom cruisers.
The cruiser bike segment, or custom bike segment, as some people term it, is the single largest sales category in motorcycling and has been that for quite some time now. And I think the reason that it is because a cruiser or a custom is simply a way for someone to put their own identity on a motorcycle.
While baby boomers were polishing chrome, other riders tested the limits of their own freedom, exploring new frontiers on affordable, lightweight motorcycles.
Desert riding. It's a unique sort of environment with the sand washes, and it used to be one of the few places where you could ride, just freely anywhere you wanted to go. I've been stuck several times with motorcycles, particularly in Baja. If you run out of gas or it gets too dark to see and your light doesn't work, you don't have a light, it is a great place to ride.
Before motorcycles were for jumping off ramps, ripping up hills, or cruising from coast to coast, they were designed for utility. Drive your dream with speed. Riding a motorcycle is not always a leisure activity. Whether for work or for getting to work, motorcycles adapt to serve a variety of functions.
Being a police officer is already a hazardous field. However, when you become a traffic enforcement officer, it becomes much more dangerous simply because you're navigating now a two-wheel bike with no outside protection other than your helmet.
The recreational riding style is entirely different from the type of precision riding that's expected of a police officer working in the field. We go through a pre-training period of about 4 weeks where one dedicates time learning the cone patterns, learning the techniques for slow riding, for high-speed riding, and then riding on different types of terrain.
In addition to rigorous training for officers, police force bikes have to be highly specialized and precision-oriented.
The BMW has minimized a lot of risk by coming out with a bike that has ABS brakes. It also has a heated grips, which really do well for you in the winter. You don't have to worry about your fingertips going numb. Also, they've come out with a windshield that is electronically raised or lowered for taller riders and shorter riders.
Police work is nothing new for the motorcycle. Since the early 20th century, motorcycle manufacturers have responded to commercial, municipal, and personal needs for functional transportation.
Once the gasoline engine developed, you had, a real burst of production of machines. There's over 250 makers in America in total.
Before Henry Ford made four-wheeled travel affordable for everyone, motorcycles with sidecars served as primitive family wagons.
The sidecar came into popularity really as a reaction to what was happening with the industry because of Henry Ford.
In fact, in 1919, we built 27,000 motorcycles. 16,000 had a sidecar. That's a marked difference from today.
In the 1930s, increasing pressure from the automobile industry made manufacturers turn to commercial markets to improve brand awareness.
One market was a utility market that both Indian and Harley-Davidson pursued. The other result in the 30s, as automobiles got faster, the police needed pursuit vehicles, and they turned to motorcycles.
In addition to civil service, motorcycles played an integral role in the military during the two world wars. No other motorcycle company was more affected by the tides of war than BMW. Forced out of the aircraft industry after World War I, Bavarian Motor Works transferred wartime technology to a new product.
When the First World War was finished, by the Treaty of Versailles, it was not any longer allowed in Germany for 5 years to build aero engines and aircraft. BMW was a very flexible and fast company, and within only a few weeks, BMW switched over to motorcycles. And Max Fritz designed a motorcycle, the R32, in just 5 weeks, and we presented that motorbike in 1923. It was a technical revolution. Already in our first motorbike, we had the flat twin, so-called boxer engine. We didn't have a chain. It was a drive shaft, a cardan shaft already in the first motorcycle. The handling of this new bike was much, much better than everything which was on the market up to this time.
BMW's air-cooled Boxer engine and durable enclosed shaft drive gave the German army a huge advantage in the Libyan desert when the country returned to the battlefront. But technological superiority proved not enough to ensure a German victory in World War II.
The factory was bombed by the Allies, and after World War II we lost our car factory and became under Soviet occupation. So there was a production ban by the Allies on other products. Only in 1948 we could start again with the first motorcycle, the R24. It was a one-cylinder motorcycle with 250 cc's. But it was a beginning again.
One of the things that people need to have is something that should be very useful in such a sad moment like after World War II. No one had the money to buy a motorcycle or a car, so the cheapest way was to buy the cucciolo, or little pup in English, little dog. The engine was nothing more than an auxiliary engine that was put on the frame of a bicycle. It was an engine together with a tank, 4-stroke, 38 cc, with 1 single liter of gasoline. This engine could cover a distance of 100 kilometers.
After the war, in both Europe and Japan, of course, all the countries were devastated. And so there was a great need for light, inexpensive, fuel-efficient transportation. Small motorcycles made all the sense in the world. And that's really what started the modern boom in motorcycling in Europe and then in Japan.
The early 1950s saw the rise and fall of numerous Japanese motorcycle manufacturers. 4 companies with backgrounds as diverse as textiles and musical instruments would stand the test of time.
For Suzuki, who was manufacturing looms and dealing with the textile industry, it was very tough coming back after World War II and reestablishing themselves in that type of marketplace. There was a real shortage of raw materials. They saw a much stronger need for motorized transportation within their own Japanese domestic market.
It was Honda's Super Cub in 1963 that made the largest international splash. In America, the Super Cub was an extreme departure from the large 650cc machines that were in vogue at the time.
Honda had a different idea. Honda wanted to open motorcycling to everyone. At first, there wasn't much acceptance for this little machine that most people thought couldn't go around the block, much less take you on any kind of a trip. Well, it turns out that these things were indestructible.
The Cub's dependability, fuel efficiency, and affordability have made it a staple for developing countries around the world.
As third world nations start to build their economies, there is a need for inexpensive transportation that's also very inexpensive to operate. And to date, I think there's something well over 30 million of those motorcycles that have been sold worldwide.
As cities get more congested and gas prices soar in Europe and America, economical motorcycles and scooters are returning to the daily commute. But who said a scooter had to be small and friendly?
See, a motor scooter doesn't have to be plastic with little wheels. What I'm doing now isn't anything like I've ever done. It is a motor scooter. It's a motor scooter that's made for 200-pound people. It's a motor scooter with something like 100 horsepower, 50 to 100 horsepower. It's a motor scooter for baby boomers who are old.
As our needs have changed over the years, motorcycle design has adapted in response. Some human needs, however, are a bit more emotional than just getting from A to B. All riders want bikes that make people stop and stare. When purchasing a motorcycle today, style and sex appeal are as important as horsepower and handling.
We can talk about high performance, we can talk about technical performance, we can talk about reliability, but at the gut level, someone has to look at a motorcycle and say, I want that beautiful motorcycle, I have to have it.
Colour is exceptionally important. What we make in our sector of the market is a leisure product, it's a lifestyle product. Fashion drives, pick a bad colour, it can kill the sale of the bike.
You know they have to make you feel good when you see them. That's why we decide about the exhaust pipes, they have to look powerful. We look at the finishes, chrome, cast aluminium, forged aluminium, red paint. If an engineer asks us a question, we can tell them to the 0.6 of a millimeter, to a 1/10 of a millimeter exactly how high certain things are at certain points. So we can work hand in hand with engineering. When this is done in a small scale, it's not as effective and it's not as easy. When you see them like this, it's almost like having the real thing parked out there.
It's not only the bikes that have to look sexy. A booming accessory market keeps manufacturers busy making everything from riding boots to full-piece leathers.
Boots, helmets, jackets, everything that you would wear, from fashion design, product design, vehicle design, color design, materials. We even have pockets for your thermos. We have pockets for, your maps and things like that.
While more and more bells and whistles are slapped on both bike and rider, motorcycle design is reverting to simpler, classic shapes. Brands like Triumph, Indian, and Vincent are coming back from the dead.
In 91, when we commenced making motorcycles, we only had 2 markets. And today we've taken production up to 33,000 machines. We export into nearly 40 markets, and now nearly 80% of what we build is exported worldwide. We see our growth, I think, predominantly in the classic area, models such as the Bonneville, Thunderbird, and the derivatives of those machines.
Nostalgia for early American design, epitomized by the 1940s Indian chief, has not only revived vintage motorcycle companies, it's also turned the heads of many foreign manufacturers.
The Indian that I think most Americans remember appeared first in 1940. It had a very, very elegant teardrop-shaped tank, large skirts on the front fenders. The whole motorcycle almost looks like it's moving when it's sitting still. Manufacturers still building modern machines in which they're emulating the styling of the 1940s chief. Kawasaki builds a model called the Drifter that is absolutely inspired by the chief.
While many try to mimic this early American styling, no one can touch the magic of Harley-Davidson cruiser design.
There's an aesthetic that is specifically Harley-Davidson. Sharpness in terms of the lines and exoskeletal in terms of all the parts being very visible, and each little bolt is a jewel of some kind.
The placement of various elements and the covers and the finishes, the exhaust systems, the intakes, all have a relationship sculpturally.
With the V-Rod, you see this company that's had a real strong stake in this FL styling suddenly bring us a machine that's a double overhead cam, water-cooled machine with lots of electronics on it. I think it's a masterful original styling.
Naked styling is a current that travels through design centers around the world. From the Yamaha VMAX to the Ducati Monster, there is a universal attraction to raw bones beauty.
And the VMAX related to American hot rod ingenuity. Reduce the motorcycle to its most elemental state and emphasize the flow of power through the engine from the intake through the exhaust.
Some manufacturers would rather not bear it all. Sport bikes in the 1980s emerged out of Japan and revolutionized motorcycle design with tons of plastic.
Suzuki design prior to the Katana was really standard Japanese style. It wasn't until the late 1970s, early 1980s that you started to see bikes with full fairings and plastic bodywork and more of a sleek aerodynamic design.
One of the great advantages to the all-enveloping bodywork is that everything underneath doesn't have to be beautiful. There started to be much more advancement in terms of the chassis, the suspension, and engine design, but we didn't have to worry about exactly how it looked.
High performance and beautiful lines are not mutually exclusive. In Bologna, Italy, style and speed are the heart of a Ducati sport bike.
We normally try and do the forms that are quite voluptuous and in a way, and a lot of people see sexual connotations in there. When people see our new motorcycle, and mum walks around with her kids, so she has to hide them behind the back to keep them away from the bikes, and they have to look mean and voracious and tough.
If I had to give an answer to those people that ask me why I have to choose a Ducati that is more expensive than a Japanese bike or another competitor, first of all, passion is the main engine. There are no technology, there are no Japanese, there are no engineers that can steal the passion that Ducati have.
Like musicians writing a film score, designers add emotion to a motorcycle's skeleton.
We work with the bone structure. We work at an early phase with engineers and say, well, can I change the chassis or can I make it look like this? In opposed to some products, like maybe a truck or a car, that have a lot of technology hidden. Motorcycles, you get what you see. You see the engine, you see the drivetrain, you see the front forks. We design them. The engineers say how strong it has to be, how thick materials have to be, and we said, can we change the form to give it a different feeling?
And we believe when we dive into these projects that we're creating an art form. Always have, always will.
Apparently, so did the Guggenheim Museum. In 1998, the Art of the Motorcycle exhibit showcased some of the most beautiful designs and notable models in the history of the motorcycle.
While people in my age group are generally collecting contemporary motorcycles, I know that there are collectors who are into nostalgic bikes that will pay up to $500,000 for an old motorcycle. And I haven't reached that point yet, or the bank account for that yet, but in time I will.
Why do I collect motorcycles? That's a difficult question to answer. They're beautiful, no frills, nothing on the bike that's not intended to enhance its performance characteristics. And I think the purity of that design is what really excites me.
As technology enhances the tools available to designers, the boundaries of conceptual design begin to disappear.
We're not designing for tomorrow, we're designing for maybe 6, 7, 8, or 10 years away. Our motorcycles, when we start designing, will still be sold 10 years from the time we design them. So we have to do very forward-looking products.
The future of motorcycling is very exciting right now. We are seeing the application of technologies that have been used in the automobile industry and technologies that are coming from the world of computers and home electronics. So we are seeing GPS systems, we're seeing ABS systems on motorcycling, integrated electronics, super light motorcycles, motorcycles that are customizable.
Within the next few years, you want to have everything on that motorcycle that you might have in your home office. I don't see email connections there yet, but I know people are going to want them.
You may not see anything with bolts and screws in them in the future. It could be all carbon fiber and glued together. And we laugh about these things now, but it's a real thing.
The future of motorcycling is not tucked away in the R&D labs of the major manufacturers. It's sitting in the workshops and on the drawing boards of individuals around the world.
I really think the best designs are not coming out of corporate headquarters. They're coming from creative people that have an artistic flair and a little bit of an engineering skill, but they're kind of dreamers.
More and more consumers can sort of have the benefit of what all the individuals have done. And what happens is when something becomes a trend, the manufacturers will take note, and a lot of times they'll incorporate certain changes that the individuals have done and put them in their production bikes.
John Britton was probably the most brilliant motorcycle designer that I have ever come across. Man made his own engine, man made his own frame, made his own suspension, beyond cutting edge. It was stuff that still is not on motorcycles today. The man truly was a genius.
Eric Buell actually worked for Harley-Davidson. He struck out on his own, created his own company. It was so successful that Harley-Davidson actually bought the company from him.
Today's inventors are still tinkering with just as much vigor as they were 100 years ago.
And I'm betting that there's a whole generation of people who are going to want a motor scooter. They still don't know it yet because I'm just a little bit ahead of them all. When I showed the motor scooter for the first time just a few months ago, people looked at me and said, well, it's not a Hurricane, Craig. To which I say, give it 30 years. We'll see.